Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you today. Sherilyn is on a well-deserved vacation, excuse me, and so I'm going to try to fill her large shoes here. But she always has some amazing information about some unusual foods. I think coconuts was last week. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about food safety and thermometers. Not as interesting as coconuts maybe, but when the power's about to go out, it's something we all begin to think about. Food's expensive, so we want to think about how we can get prepared for that. Before I do that though, I would like to tell you a bit about extension. I've had so many people to ask me over the years, extension of what? So I just wanted to share cooperative extension is over 100 years old. It's in North Carolina. It's an extension of the two land-grant universities, A&T State University and NC State University. A&T's in Greensboro, of course, and NC State is in Raleigh. So land-grant universities do specific research on areas of USDA interest, agricultural interest, nutritional kind of things, food safety, that sort of thing, and have studied other areas through the years, but they began focusing on rural households and over the years have expanded into all households. Right now, local food is important and community gardens. So in our area of North Carolina, in Durham County, our areas of education are agriculture, helping farmers, crops and animal products, dairy cow, beef cows, focus on family resources, youth development, various community development outreaches for family improvement and resources, home and community gardening information, and nutrition and food safety, which is something we're going to focus on today. So if you have a chance, you might want to go on their websites and check that out. Cooperative extension. I will say that as it's an extension of their research modes, sometimes other extension states will use our research, say in food safety. I can think of several states that use our food safety resources. And also we use a lot of things from, say, Cornell or University of Virginia. And so we share, but they're all research-based extension research resources. So just sharing a little bit about extension of what? Extension of research. So talking about disaster preparedness, hurricanes and tornadoes, floods. We've already had one scary storm about 2 weeks ago, and we're in the part of North Carolina, we don't get it directly, but we may get power outages and lots of rain and wind, and power outages come from that. So it's important to kind of be prepared for our refrigerated and frozen dry food preparation, what we're going to do. So we're going to talk a bit about thermometers for the moment. So first, it's a good idea to purchase or locate thermometers. So first, look around and see what thermometers that you have. This would not be health thermometers, of course, but just speaking about refrigerator or freezer thermometers. Now I'll show you two here. You see the one on the top it has little black boxes that hopefully you can see these that indicate where the temperature should be in your refrigerator and in your freezer. Okay, in your freezer it should be 0 degrees or less. Sometimes I know I have mine set for like -5 degrees 0. Okay, and for the refrigeration, somewhere between 32 and 40, no higher than 40 degrees. So this one would be harder to see. This would be my preference, simply because if you'll notice, the areas in blue tell you where the your thermometer should be located and what your temperature should be for your refrigerator and for your freezer. So here with the freezer, 0 degrees or less, and then with the refrigerator, it's a smaller scale here, but somewhere between, say, 33 and 40 degrees. And it's a known fact that if your food is at 41 degrees for longer than, or higher for longer than 4 hours, somebody's going to get sick. So this is why it's really important to check your temperature of your refrigerator before it's necessary. So if you only have one, check your freezer. Just put it in there, leave it in there overnight. And if it's 0 degrees, you're good. Or you can turn it back to below 0. And that way it gives you a little more cushion if the power does go out. And then when you're sure what the temperature is in your freezer, put it in your refrigerator and check that. And then I would leave it in the refrigerator. Sometimes you'll have a little notch with a suction cup on the back that you can put on the wall of the refrigerator. And that's helpful because you can check it quickly periodically. So that's just something to have. And if you don't have a refrigerator thermometer, that's something I really would invest in, because otherwise, you know, it's just a guessing game. And when the power goes out, we don't want to guess about too many things. So a refrigerator and or freezer thermometer. So remember, a rule of thumb would be that foods in a refrigerator that have gone above 41 degrees for more than 4 hours are at an increased risk for spoilage and non-safety. So keep that in mind. To plan ahead, for example, you can move items from the refrigerator into the freezer before the power goes out. So anything you don't think you're going to need and you're expecting a storm, put it in the freezer. That's probably the best way, because the fuller your freezer is, the longer it's going to keep things at proper temperatures. Remember, foods held above 41 degrees for more than 4 hours can support the growth of those pathogens that we want to try to avoid. So what you might do is after 8 hours, when the power's been out, 8 hours, you might want to open your freezer, test the food, see if they're ice crystals, and if it's still good. Check every few hours, just shut the door fast. After 4 hours of the power being out, you might want to check those items that you know in your refrigerator that you didn't put in the freezer, but that you know are at risk. You might want to check those. And this is where these thermometers come in helpful. Okay. So I have 2 tip-sensitive thermometers here, and they're a little different from one another. And one starts at 0 degrees. Hopefully you can see that. And this one starts at 50 degrees. I was thinking that was right. The one at 50 degrees, it's fine for checking your meatloaf and your casseroles, but this would not be helpful if you were checking the temperature of something in your refrigerator. The power's gone out, it's 4 hours later, you open the door and you pull it out quickly and you put this in there. Well, the lowest temperature this one registers is 50 degrees, so that wouldn't tell you much. This one, on the other hand, would, because it goes down as far as 0, yes, 0 to 220. So, and you're thinking, so how do I know this thermometer is right? Well, you can recalibrate a thermometer. You have to have a few muscles, and so it's not something that I would like to do, but on the back sometimes there's a little nut here on the back, and you just tighten this and you turn it. So this is what you would do. You boil a pot of water on the range, and when it's really at a nice rolling boil, you'll put this into the water. Don't touch the bottom of the pan because that will give you an incorrect calculation. Put it in the water, and hopefully it'll rise to 212 or at least 211, something like that. So if within a degree or two, then that's probably close enough. If not, say if it only says 200, this thermometer is way off. And what you can do is adjust it, put it back until you get it to adjust to the 212 that it should be for boiling water. So that's something to be aware of. And you can calibrate those yourself, so that's not a problem. But the purpose for the thermometer is so you can test food as well as to test food you're cooking in the oven. But for our purposes today, we're talking about checking the temperature of the food when the power's gone out, and you need to check it after 4 hours in particular. Of course, if the food's frozen in the freezer, then you're not going to need to put a thermometer into it. And by the way, if it's got lots of ice crystals in it and it's pretty much frozen, then it's still good for a bit. Okay, so this is a different type thermometer. It has a little safety pocket for it. But basically, this is a digital thermometer. Okay, it's digital, but it's tip sensitive. So you can test your meatloaf or your turkey or whatever it is you're testing. But also, this is good for testing the food in the fridge after 4 hours if you need to test a few pieces of food that you aren't sure what the temperature is. So this is really important. And if it's digital, you can make it centigrade, but most of us will be looking at Fahrenheit. This one will go either way. These pocket thermometers, $2 or $3, not a big investment. I'll bet you already have one. But this one you can get usually for $13, $14. And you can get the very expensive ones, but this is an inexpensive one and it works fine. But if you don't have this, this is better than nothing. So just check ahead of time to see if it's as it should be. If it does go down to 0 degrees, the one that you have, besides the boiling water, you could put it in a container of crushed ice, put some water in there so it moves around, and then stick the thermometer in there. And that should register what? If it's right there at the ice and just a little bit of water, that should register 32. So the boiling water is probably a little more accurate, but that's just another method that you can use. Excuse me. So one drawback to these, though, is that you can't calibrate them yourself, and the others you can. But I've not had this to go awry. They do come with an extra battery, so I'm not selling thermometers, but this is just a very handy device. So $13 or $14, it's good to have if you can. But the most important thing that you need to have is a good thermometer to test your refrigerator and your freezer, and then at least one of these. And if you have the option, it should start at 0 degrees and go, say, 200 or so. And that way you can test your poultry, chicken at 165, as well as check your freezer and your foods when the power has gone out. Okay, so another thing you might keep in mind, if you are heating things over in the microwave, let's say they're frozen and it comes out of the freezer. This is not when the power's gone out, but you have something in the freezer and you want to have it for dinner. If you can let it set out for 20 minutes or so, that's probably helpful. If it's in a plastic container in particular, put it in a bowl of hot water and let it set there 10 minutes or so, and that way you can probably dump it into a glass bowl. Some of the research shows that the plastic that some things are frozen in can leach into the food over time. One time is not going to do you in, but you don't want to make this a habit. So, okay, you've put your semi-frozen food into the glass container, punch it, stir it around if you can, give it a minute, and continue doing that until you get the temperature up to 165. I will say that there'll be thicker pieces in that mixture probably than others. Say if you're doing a chicken or beef stew, you have the solid pieces of potato maybe and meat, and they may only register 152, for example, and the rest of it may register 160. Well, you've got a big variance there. So you want to continue stirring it and retesting it because microwaves, they don't heat evenly. So just something to be aware of, and you want to be sure that you've heated it to a safe temperature. So that's another way that these thermometers come in handy, and you can use either one of these tip-sensitive thermometers. So keep that in mind. And if there is a power outage, 2 typical questions that we usually get if the refrigerator's been out a while. One is, what about lunch meats? Bologna, sliced turkey, whatever it might be. And it makes no difference whether it has additives or not, but it's sliced lunch meat. And here, after, if the temperature has risen after 4 hours, you're going to have potential of bacterial growth because lunch meats will have a listeria potential. And so those you definitely want to throw out if it's been above 40 degrees for more than 4 hours. Raw meat will have staphylococcus, and that can create toxins. So that's something else. So if you know the power is going out, if you do have the option of there's a storm coming and you've got some chicken in the fridge and you're not going to cook it right now, I would put it in the freezer because you're going to have a lot more likelihood that it will last longer. So those two items we always get lots of questions about. So foods that can support the growth of the pathogens are riskier after being held above 41 degrees for more than 4 hours. So you want your refrigerator where? Between 33 and 40 degrees, always. Okay, and your refrigerator may be different from your neighbor's refrigerator. Some are insulated better than others. Some were there when you moved in. You don't know how old they are. So just kind of keep a watch on it and see. But if the power does go out after 4 hours, you want to pull something out, maybe kind of decide ahead of time what that will be, and check it with your thermometer. So check the food stock that don't need refrigerants. So for example, you might want to have shelf-stable foods like tuna or fruits and vegetables, dried fruits and vegetables, dried fruits, canned vegetables. These things are fine to use without cooking because they've already been processed to a safe temperature. Just be sure you have a non-electric can opener. As far as produce and fruit, things like carrots, peppers, firm produce and firm fruit, cucumbers, apples, these can be kept out a few days on your counter, so you wouldn't have to go into the fridge to get them. So these might be some things to pull out if you know the power's going to go out. And you can kind of prepare ahead of time so that if it does blow, then just open the fridge, grab those quickly, and put them on your counter. Dry foods like crackers, nut butters, breakfast bars, unsalted nuts. I only say non-salted for nutrition reasons, but nuts, they do have protein, but they are kind of high in fat if you ever do it. But if you don't have any food to eat, they are nutritious. So dried meat sticks, snack puddings, peanut butter crackers, whatever the case might be. So these are things that would not need electricity to cook. You might want to pull out some pasta and some oatmeal if you think you have some other options of how to cook it. For example, if you have hold this up so you can see it, a butane burner or a camp stove or a grill outside, then you can cook your pasta and your oatmeal, whatever it might be. Do know that those are best used outside for safety. So grill, butane burner, camp stove, you can cook some of these things on your grill. Now, all of that is assuming that the water is good. If you're on city water, in most cases, you're going to be fine. But there have been cases in North Carolina before when the water was compromised. And so if that's the case, you might want to have a storage of water somewhere that will be helpful as far as brushing your teeth, cooking if necessary, but definitely brushing your teeth and keeping hydrated. Do keep in mind, I don't think I said this before, but just to extend the life of the food in your freezer, if it's not full, you might want to take some empty cartons, milk cartons, juice cartons, wash them out well, fill them with water, and freeze them. And, leave some space for expansion, but maybe fill them at, at least 3/4 full and freeze them. And that will give more capacity to your freezer so that things will stay frozen longer. If you know that, yes, the power might go out, you can use some of those same preparation techniques and put ice blocks, if you will, in your refrigerator. Be sure it's in a carton that's not going to leak, because it will melt over that 4 hours, but it will help to keep your refrigerator colder. So just something you can think ahead about. Let's see. So you also might want to pick up some gel packs that you can freeze, and you may already have some of these. And if they've been around a while, that's fine. They probably still freeze nicely. But to have a variety of things, if you have to take things from the refrigerator after 4 hours and put into a cooler that you're really concerned about, then that will help to keep it colder. If you decide to use dry ice, that will extend the amount of time. I will tell you, though, that if you use dry ice in a cooler to keep things longer, that's all well and good. Number one, you have to know where to get it. Some grocery stores carry it, some don't. You can check on your smartphone, ask a neighbor, or ask at the grocery store. They may know. But if you do use that, you have to be aware that some things may carbonate. So if you have some liquid in there, it may carbonate. If you put milk in there, it may carbonate. But it'll taste different. But the carbonation doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. If you put orange juice in there, it may carbonate. And it's just a chemical reaction because of the dry ice. So, in summary, if you place a thermometer in your fridge and your freezer to determine the temperature before you have to know that, you'll be much better off. Have a tip sensitive thermometer. Digital is great, but if you only have the other, it's fine. It beats nothing because you can still check the temperature as long as you know the thermometer has been calibrated and you know how to read it. And you can freeze containers of water for ice to help keep the refrigerator food cold longer too. So one of the important things is to have a plan. There's one thermometer I almost missed here. Let me back up. This is an oven thermometer. Now you probably have an idea if your oven is too hot or if it's not hot enough. And so one thing you can do with an oven thermometer is to maybe set your oven on 200 degrees. Put this in there, hang it, and then with a hot mitt, after a few minutes with a hot mitt, because it will be hot, pull it out and check it. Now, if it only says 175, you know that your oven is 25 degrees short of being 200 degrees. I know my oven is 25 degrees cooler than it says it is. So as long as I know that, that's fine. And it can be recalibrated just depending on the oven and the age of the oven. But usually that's fine as long as you know. If it's like 50 degrees off, that may be something you might want to have a repair person to look at. But it is important to know that if you're doing like souffles or something that you expect to rise a certain amount and to brown a certain way, then more than 25 degrees might be something you don't want to deal with. So the important thing is to have a plan. That's really something that most people don't think about until the last minute. But it's doable. If you have children in particular, to have a plan is really important. But some things that you definitely would toss if the temperature of your fridge had gotten up to 41 degrees, in the next few hours, you either need to make other arrangements for them, or, if it's been 8 or 10 hours, you come home from a weekend and your refrigerator is obvious that it's been out, either by the smell or because the freezer is totally thawed out. Even after 5 or 6 hours, say 4 hours, you see the temperature's right, but then you see that it's gauging up to 41 degrees, for example. If you don't do something with that food in the next few hours, you probably need to throw away things like pasta salads, refrigerator, biscuits, even pre-washed leafy greens, spinach that's already been washed, cooked vegetables, fresh eggs after that amount of time. And surprisingly, even something like open spaghetti sauce, the acidity is not quite something that will carry it over any further. On the other hand, things like mustard and ketchup and Worcestershire sauce, they're fine for several days. So that just kind of gives you an outline, but hopefully it's enough inspiration that you will look at what you have and what you need. And maybe you have a relative who has several refrigerator thermometers and they're willing to give you one. And so that would be something to think about and plan ahead, though. I think I don't know, do we have any questions, Krista? And I will say we will post a link to NC State for their food portal resource, and you can go in there and look. Their variance amount, I know they're adding them every week. They're adding and updating. They're also in Spanish too, if you need to share that with a neighbor and or someone who would like to have both options. So, Krista, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we have time for just a couple of questions. I just pasted your link both in the Zoom and in Facebook.
Right.
So we have a pretty interesting question here. I think this is an old wives' tale, but will a penny on ice indicate if the freezer is cold enough?
Well, that's not the best indicator. After about an hour, the penny will probably fall, the depth of the penny, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or whatever. But if it's been a few hours, you really don't know when that penny fell or not. So the best way to test it is to check and see if there are ice crystals. Just feel and see if there are ice crystals in there. But if you come home from a weekend and it's on the bottom, that's a time to really think about that, because you don't know how long it's been out, but the penny's not going to tell you much. Sorry.
That's great. We have another question about, what about refrigerators that have a temperature gauge installed in them already? I was also wondering that.
That's great. You might want to, if it has a way you can test it, that's fine. It would probably be a much newer refrigerator that would have that. But typically you can test the temperature on the freezer, and with the refrigerator, you can just use that same thermometer and move it to the refrigerator just to test the gauge that's already in there. I think I would test it anyway. Not trusting, but just would have to test that. I will say, I mentioned milk a little bit earlier. Some people feel like if milk has been in the fridge and the temperatures fallen risen to 41 degrees, that would the milk make you sick? And no, it won't, because it's pasteurized. Different than raw milk, it's been pasteurized, the pathogens have been killed by heat. So it may taste a little different, but it's not going to make you sick if it's refrigerated in a cooler for a few hours. So if it's mom's milk though, for breastfed babies, I would throw that out. Don't want to take any chances there.
Great. So we have another question. What is the best place to purchase these nice temperature thermometers, I think she means?
Hardware store, Amazon, Walmart, and they shouldn't be very expensive. They should be less than $10 for one. And you don't need a digital for the refrigerator or the freezer type. And you can actually use just the tip sensitive for the others also. The digital is just nice. But testing your freezer and your refrigerator temp before you have to know is really important, because if it's already at 40 degrees and the power goes out, you don't have a long time to play. So it's all about keeping our bodies safe.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Anybody have one more question? I have one coming in about pork and beans. So do you have to heat canned pork and beans to eat them?
No, you don't, because it's been processed when they canned those. And that's kind of nice, because they're pretty nutritious. They have good fiber, good protein, not a lot of sugar. So surprisingly, that's probably a good thing to have on hand if you anticipate the power going out, or if you're going on a day camping trip.
Very cool. Any further questions? We have about 30 seconds. All right. Well, if not, I think we are out of questions and out of time, as I say. So thank you so much, Peggy, for joining us. You went above and beyond in replacing our wonderful colleague this week. So thank you so much.
Okay. I hope this gives you some ideas to base your food safety on. Thanks.